Welcome to the Power Planning Podcast series with Mark Sanborn and Heather Christie, where our goal is to help you achieve more results in life and business by teaching you our simple and practical power planning process. In this session, you are going to learn that power planning doesn't create more work, it creates more results. It isn't complicated, but simple. Power planning will help you get more results more quickly, more predictably, and more enjoyably. And in this 4-session podcast, you will learn exactly how to do it. Now over to you, Mark Sanborn and Heather Christie.
Well, thanks. It's great to be with you on this podcast. We're delighted that you've joined us and that you'll be listening in as we talk about some very important principles for power planning. You may be wondering, who am I? Well, hopefully you might have seen one of my books like The Fred Factor or You Don't Need a Title to Be a Leader. But I'm a professional speaker and author in Denver, Colorado, who advises leaders. And my business is about helping people learn to lead or lead better. In the process of advising leaders, I can tell you that not only do I use planning, but I have spent entire weekends at retreats facilitating executive planning. And so I've seen the best and the worst of it, the good, bad, and the ugly, and I'm sure that my co-host Heather has as well. Heather, tell us a little bit about you.
Thanks, Mark. So my name is Heather Christie, and I'm a recovering attorney. I currently am practicing as an executive and leadership coach and have been for almost 11 years now. And like Mark, I have seen a lot of good, bad, and the ugly with planning. I do a lot of planning with my clients, everywhere from CEOs and executives to nonprofits. And before you grab your samurai sword and want to take yourself out because you're headed into a 4-series podcast on planning, here's something I want you to know what we're doing here together. This is really much more of a dialogue than a scripted podcast. So I am going to be talking with Mark, who I have tons of respect for and all that he's done in his career on leadership and strategic planning and planning. And we're going to dialogue and we're going to talk to you about this power planning process. And I want you to know, in my past, when I was an attorney, my first foray into planning was really quite a disaster. I think some of my partners may have gone to a seminar or maybe read an article and decided, all of the attorneys here need to have a plan. So they handed us this 20-page document and said, just get this to us by Friday with no instruction. And, back in that time, I wouldn't know a goal if it bit me. So, fast forward now, many years later, I teach people a very simple and practical way of planning. And when Mark and I got together to collaborate for this program, it was really about bringing some value to as many people as we could get to. And so we're excited to have you here with us, and I hope you stick with us. We have a lot of goodies to give away to you.
Well, and I would add 2 other points, and that is, the first is, I think we're both a little bit figuratively ADD in that we hate boring, and regrettably, a lot of what you've probably heard about planning, I know a lot of what I've heard has been boring. So we want this to be as enjoyable as possible. And secondly, it's a mutual admiration society because I've known Heather for many years, and I think a great deal of what she does and her expertise. And if you're listening today and you haven't ever really collaborated with someone else that you respect and enjoy working with, I suggest you do that because it creates a kind of hybrid vigor where the ideas that result are even better than the individual ideas that each party brings to the party. So with that, we're ready to talk about power planning, and I think we're going to begin with kind of an essential question, and that is, what is success?
Yes, Mark. My very favorite definition of success that I've ever heard comes from Earl Nightingale, and it goes like this. Success is the progressive realization of a worthy goal. Now, that may make all kinds of sense logically, but it's not until you really break it down and think it through where you can start to, take it on for yourself. So if we break that definition down, the progressive realization of a worthy goal, the first thing we have to do in this definition is we have to have a worthy goal. Well, what does worthy mean? Worthy means that this is a goal that's actually worthy of your investment of time, effort, energy, and money. If you set a goal that's out there that's not inspiring or exciting or worthy of you, then the chances of you going after that are so very slim. So make sure when you think about worthy goal, you're not worried, am I worthy of the goal? That's really not what it's about. Is the goal worthy of your time and your effort? So that's the first part to really look at. You have to have a worthy goal. Now, having a goal in general, that means you know what you want. So that's a big part of what we're going to talk about during our session here. The other thing that's interesting about this definition, the progressive realization of a worthy goal, I used to believe that success was all about achievement. Once I accomplish the goal, then I'm successful. But that's not what Earl says. He says it's not about achieving the goal that makes you successful. You're actually successful when you're in progress, in motion toward that goal. And I want you to really think about the last time that you went after something that was big for you, that was really important, that was worthy. You felt good every time you got closer, as you were in motion, as you were working toward that goal. So remember, progressive. The last thing that I just want to mention here is if you're not waking up every day excited to get closer to your worthy goal, then you may not have one currently. And it doesn't mean you haven't had one in the past. I think we've probably all had worthy goals in the past, but I work with a lot of really, really successful people. And if there's one challenge I see quite often, it's not that people haven't set goals in the past, is that sometimes they forget to reset their goals and have something out there that they're really excited about. So, one thing that is sort of common practice in goal setting, you may have heard the acronym SMART goals over the years. But Mark, we have something that we created called the Sane goal. Do you want to talk to the listeners about what a Sane goal is?
You bet, because SMART goals have some good attributes, but we've added a few nuances to try to simplify the process. Really, what planning is about, in my mind, is reverse engineering. It's about figuring out in advance what you want to accomplish or who you want to become, and then reverse engineering it to the present so that you get there. And to be honest, Heather, I haven't always been the poster boy for goals, because as much as I like goals and as important as goals are, I want to just add in a side thought, and that is, don't become so goal fixated that you miss some unexpected opportunities that arise. I can tell you in my business, I've had some great evolution take place where I didn't set out in a particular direction, but I ended up there because I took advantage of the opportunities that came up. So we're going to work both sides of the street, and we're going to talk about the importance of goals, but we're also going to remind you that as you are in the progress of realizing your goals, as Earl Nightingale so notably said, you may have some opportunities arise, and you're going to have to filter whether or not those goals are indeed worthy of your attention. So a SANE goal is really an acronym for what I think is so important in goal setting. And the S is for specific. And the specificity will be very helpful. If you don't know what it is that you're aiming for, chances are you won't hit it. The A is for actionable, because a lot of planning, and I think personally, probably the primary reason why planning fails is it doesn't become actionable. We don't know at the end of the planning session who is supposed to do what by when. And that to me is really fundamental planning 101. But the N is really important. And we're using N to stand for notable. And when Heather and I talked about this, Heather's like, let's kind of unpack notable. And I'm reminded of something that you've all heard, because I'm assuming this is a pretty erudite group. But Daniel Burnham said, make no little plans. They don't have the power to stir men's souls. And I paraphrase that just a little bit. But by notable, it means that it's important to you and to others. Frankly, people don't help anyone achieve a goal that doesn't have some impact or significance to them. So if you've got a big goal that's going to require others' participation, it needs to be notable. It needs to be something that they can see benefit in their team, in their job, in their organization for supporting its achievement. And the other thing is, frankly, I know people that set a lot of goals that they don't care about, and surprise, because those goals aren't notable to them, they don't achieve them. It goes back to that old cliche about climbing the ladder of success and getting to the top and realizing you lean the ladder on the wrong wall. Well, Heather, I'll let you deal with the E.
Okay, so the E is enjoyable. And, just as Mark was saying about the goal being notable, it really has to be important. It's got to be significant, not just a list of to-dos. And the enjoyable piece of this is all about mindset. And I think a lot of this program that we're going to be sharing with you has to do with mindset that may separate this power planning process from many of the other plans that you've thought about or looked at. I think planning can become really mechanical if you let it. And I think that's a really big mistake. If you're not setting a goal that's enjoyable, something that you really want, something, again, that's worthy of your time, effort, energy that you're going to be investing, then it's almost not worth doing. So let's just talk for a second about a weight loss goal. That's the number one goal that's set by Americans. And most people don't plan, but if they plan at all, they plan that one time of the year. And it just so happens that time of the year is coming up as we record this session, and that's New Year's Eve. And so weight loss is a really easy one to talk about. Now, you might look at a weight loss goal and say, well, there's nothing enjoyable about that. And yet, if you spend some time from a mindset perspective and really think about, well, what would be enjoyable about that? How about the whole idea of health and fitness in general? It is the single most important thing that we have in life. And I know this for certain because if you ask anyone, no matter what they've achieved in success or financially, they give it all back to make sure they have their health. So again, reframing the goal to make sure that you're looking at the positive, you're looking at the piece of that goal, the vision for what is the impact going to be on my life once I've accomplished this goal.
By the way, let me just interject. I think sometimes, as honest as we try to be when we set goals, we kid ourselves. And I'll give you an example of that. I put a big emphasis on enjoyable. And many years ago, while I was still in college, I got my pilot's license. I love anything with an engine. I particularly love airplanes and aviation. But over the years, I stopped flying less and less, and I haven't been current, which means although I know how to fly, I can't legally fly without going up and refreshing myself and passing a current exam. And so a few years ago, I decided, you know what? I've got a goal to get current. It was specific, it was actionable, it was notable for me. You don't take flying lightly. It's not like riding a bike. You don't fall off and survive. And it was certainly going to be enjoyable. Well, a year went by and I hadn't gotten current. And another year went by and I'd sought out some instructors, but I hadn't gotten current. And I finally realized, you know what, as enjoyable as it would to get current, it's not that important or practical. And I had to adjust my goal. I think people agonize because they set goals that they don't achieve, but they kind of drag them around, like a ball and chain, because they haven't adjusted and said, you know what, I thought that was a notable, enjoyable goal. It's not, and I need to abandon it. The same can happen in an organization. You can sit around with your team and come up with some grandiose ideas, only to find out that in the initial stages, what you thought would be a great product, your customer could care less about. And rather than become rigidly locked into that goal, that's when you have to adjust. And sometimes the second part of that is to abandon. If you don't just adjust the goal to make it different, you let go of it, you let it go, you abandon it, and you move on to what's truly important.
Thank you, Mark. I think that's a great distinction on just the fact that sometimes we get way too stuck in where we think we need to go. And that's why I really love the whole thought of reflection as well. Really doing the checking in as you go through in your goal setting process and as you're progressively in realization, are you still after the right goal? Hugely important. So I think it would be a great time for us to introduce our power planning model. And the model, I'm going to share with you the model and then we'll break it down for you. The model is a formula and it's mindset times plan times execution equals results. And I think if we brought you through this step by step, I would personally like to start with the back of the formula, the results piece of the formula, because I think, again, as Mark was just talking about with our Sane goal, you've got to have that result identified for yourself in such a clear way that you can go back then and put together the right mindset, the right plan, and know exactly how you're going to execute to get there. And it's so interesting for me. I still get surprised to this day, and I shouldn't, that the most difficult question that I ask of any executive is the very simple question, what do you want? And as I ask that, I want you to ask that question for yourself. What do you want? And when you start to get some clarity, I also want you to go back and really think about, do I have the level of clarity that I need? Do I have a result that's clear enough for me that I am absolutely rock solid, crystal clear what this is. And I'm going to give you just an example of this. Let's just say that I said to you, Mark, we're coming up on the holidays. I think, for New Year's Eve, we should consider going up and celebrating in Chicago. Now, if I have a goal to go to Chicago for New Year's Eve, and we're going to go out there with the Sanborns, that's somewhat clear. I sort of know the region that I'm going to be in. But if I just said, hey, Mark, meet me in Chicago for New Year's Eve, how likely do you think we would be to actually catch up with each other if that was the extent of my planning process?
Yeah, not likely. Well, we'd have fun, but we'd be having fun as individual couples, not together at the same place.
Exactly right. So if instead I said, hey, on New Year's Eve, let's get the party started early, and I'd love for you and Darla to meet us at 4 p.m. at Riva's on Navy Pier in Chicago. How would we do then?
Well, we do much better because now we have the destination. What we need, though, is the process to get there, which really is what the rest of the formula is about. By the way, the real logical, linear thinkers, and I tend to be among them, are going, now, wait a minute, why are you calling it power planning? Well, the results is why, because power is the ability to create a result. I mean, that's one definition of power. And that's what the problem with planning is. Planning often creates nothing more than a plan. Power planning puts the emphasis on the results that are going to be created by being simple and being actionable. And so if you know where it is that you want to end up, then you have to determine how to get there. And that brings us back to the beginning of this, which is mindset. And we're just going to go back and forth, but I'll let Heather start with how she defines mindset and why it's so important.
I do think that mindset is one of the most often forgotten factors in the whole planning process and the achievement of goals. And the reason I say that is I think that we have really been trained almost to focus on the activity. I just have to do more. I have to work harder, whatever that is, whatever that activity is. And yet, if you don't have the mindset that responds to the new result that you're after, the old mindset cannot get you a different result. Now, Albert Einstein said something like that, and he said it much more eloquently than I just did. But I really want you to get that. If you want a new and different result, you can't keep the same mindset that gave you your existing result. So what do you have to do? You've got to really spend some time focusing on the vision for where you want to go. Now, in making any kind of change and setting any goal that's new, that's different, that's exciting for you, it's going to involve change. And maybe you're driven toward this goal because of some level of dissatisfaction you have in your life currently. Or maybe there's just a vision of, I think things are going well, but God, is this all there is to life? I mean, maybe there's something out there that's bigger, that's better, that's more. So maybe it's just a vision that's new, that's different. Whatever it is for you, whatever gets you excited about this goal that you're setting, it's really, really critical to ask yourself the very important question, who do I need to be in order to accomplish this goal? Who do I need to be to do the kinds of things I'm going to have to do in order to get this result that I'm so excited about? So mindset, Mark, I think is just really about taking the time, slowing down. Don't get straight into action, but think first. Those who have already accomplished the type of thing that I'm seeking to accomplish, who are they being? And as an example, I would just throw out some words that might make sense. If I were going after a goal that was really important for me, I might have to be committed. I might have to be disciplined. I might have to be motivated. So be thinking about what is required from a mindset perspective, because we do know one thing, and that is what you think about most is what you bring into your world.
Well, I agree. I think it's about desire and dissatisfaction, and both or either have to be present in a pretty large quantity to drive you to complete a significant goal. Now, the smaller the goal, the smaller the dissatisfaction or desire. But I want to add one thing, Heather, about vision, and that is that no goal should be created in a vacuum, because to me, the vision you have for your business or your life is a fully completed puzzle. And you need to ask yourself, how do these individual goals fit into that larger puzzle to complete it? And again, if you do goal setting in isolation, you end up all over the map and you realize that you don't have any synergy or any congruency in your goal setting. So those are some of the things to consider about mindset. which then brings us to the plan. And basically, the plan is the project. And Heather, you said something earlier. To-do lists are not planning. To-do lists are productivity techniques. I love to-do lists. I can check off 30 or 40 things a day, but none of those things may necessarily be significant. They might have been necessary, but they weren't significant. So when we talk about the plan, we're talking about projects, people, and process, because those are the three things that go into any plan. What is the project that will take us to the results? Who are the people that need to be involved? And what is the process that they will go through? So Heather, talk a little bit about those three Ps.
I think that those three Ps really bring it together. And I think you're right that the plan is something that it's strategic. It's not just an action item list, a to-do list. We all have them, and those are sometimes way longer than we need them to be. But how often does your to-do list get in the way of something that is most important? So that plan becomes really important. What is the project that I'm working on? How do we break it down? Which people are involved? So that's kind of like the who does what by when. If you don't have the who does what by when, then forget about it. And I'll take that even one step further, is to say, sometimes it sounds so simple, but sometimes these plans don't get accomplished because they just haven't been actually put in a calendar. They might be in writing, they might look really good, they might make all kinds of sense, but if you don't actually take that plan and have a process for yourself for how you put that into your calendar and make it happen, when am I going to find time to do it? That I think is also a really important piece of the process.
Well, and I'll take it a half step further and connect it to the final part here after we talked about mindset and plan, and that is execution. And I've been through so many board meetings where this has happened. We talk about all the things we're going to do, but we end without ever assigning the action to a particular person or group. If you were going to execute on the project and the people and the process, you need to have a very clear definition of who is responsible and by when. I always say that when it comes to execution, always delegate the what and the when. I'm a little less concerned about delegating the how, because frankly, that can move you into the zone of being a micromanager. Of course, if you're like me, I'm kind of a big picture thinker, and sometimes I give people things to do and when to do it, and they come back and go, I have no idea how to get started on this project. So you certainly have to give people enough information that they can act. But again, the execution is about what needs to be done and by when. I mean, really, at the end of the day, execution is just a fancier word for doing.
Absolutely. And I want to remind everyone, Mark, that the formula we put together is exactly that. It's a formula. Mindset times plan times execution equals results. So let's say that you understand what you're going after this next year, and you're going to make it your best year ever. And you sit down and you take the time and you draft your plan, and your plan makes all kinds of sense. And you sit down and you think about, what's the mindset that I need to have? And I'm excited, I'm motivated, I'm really going to do it this year. And then you fall down on execution. What is mindset times plan times zero?
Zero.
That's going to be a zero. So that's why we have multipliers in here instead of addition symbols. So really important that all three pieces of this formula really come together.
Well, Heather, how can our listeners get started? Why don't we talk about a couple of exercises that are easy to do but have a good payoff? What do you suggest?
Okay, so in every session that we do, we're going to do a get started now exercise. And here's what I'd love for you to do if you're listening to this right now. I hope you have a pen and paper handy. Here's your assignment, should you take it on. The assignment's about reflection. So I want you to think about, what are your biggest accomplishments this year? If you happen to be listening to this at the end of the year, I want you to think back over the full year and sit down either by yourself or grab your spouse or a family member and actually write down every single accomplishment that you can think of from the year. Now, I don't want you to just have a piece of paper. I want you to have a pad of paper, because here's what's going to happen. The first couple of things that you write down, those are going to be the big things. Those are going to be the obvious ones. Please don't stop there. I want you to force yourself to keep writing and keep writing and keep writing. This is something that Paul and I do every year at the end of the year. We go away to some beautiful beach somewhere and we sit down with our pads of paper and we start writing and writing. And then the next thing to do is to share them with each other. And you will be amazed at how many of the little things you may have forgotten about. And I want you to ask yourself, Did we celebrate those wins along the way? So here's part 2 of this exercise. Part 2 is, how will you acknowledge and celebrate your wins? This is also an area that I think is so critically important, especially for those of you who are high achievers out there. I know that it's so often that you will just drive and drive and drive, and even though you're accomplishing things all along the way, if you don't stop to acknowledge them, you don't actually get to, experience the joy of what it's like to get things done, to accomplish the things that you're after.
Well, and that celebration really creates the momentum that you need when you're discouraged and you're trying to achieve big goals in the future. I'd also add this. I would add, who will you acknowledge and who will you celebrate in addition to yourself? Frankly, I work with a lot of high achievers that do a pretty good job of acknowledging and celebrating their own success, but they don't always share the love with the people that have helped them create that success. So I would add that into, I'm looking at the clock. This session is nearly over. We hope you'll come back. You don't want to miss our next session, which is on overcoming resistance. So stay tuned and join us for session number 2 of Power Planning.
Thank you, Mark. It's been really great talking with you during this session. And if people want to get in touch with you, if they liked what they heard and they want more, can they find you at marksanborn.com?
They sure can.
Awesome. You can find me at heatherchristie.com. Let us know what you think about our Power Planning podcast series. If you love it, please share it. And I just want to thank you all for listening. And remember, your success begins with your clarity on what you want in life. And we'd love to help you get that clarity.